It's Mrs. Terpstra, and it's the 1950s. All right, so I just found out we're going to be out until like the 27th, and we were supposed to have a 1950s day where you get to dress up and do all the music and the dancing. So since we can't do that, I figured I would bring the 1950s to you. So to begin with, let's talk about what your crazy teacher is wearing today. It is the 1950s. And remember, this is after World War II. The economy is great. Things are good in the United States for the most part. In fact, I kind of feel like I was born in the wrong era. I love the 1950s. I love the music because it's a little bit rebellious and yet it's not like way over the top. I love the fashion of the 1950s. I love the big old skirts. I do. I love it. I just love it. I love the cars. They're awesome. But women's rights might be an issue that I couldn't deal with. So let me show you a couple of things. First of all, you notice I'm chewing gum today because that was a way for women to kind of be a little bit rebellious if you were a teenager. So that was an unladylike thing to do. So I'm going to chew gum. Really famous gum of the day was Beeman's. Yes, black licorice. Ugh. I'm not chewing that, but that was really popular. Now, if you look at the outfit, we've got the horn rim glasses, which were started by a singer named Buddy Holly. We're going to talk about him a little bit tomorrow, actually. High ponytails, ribbons, headbands, that kind of stuff. Now, you notice when I came in, let me show you this dress here. Of course, you've got all these little underskirts. And according to my mom, she lived during this era, she said the more underskirts and the more colors you had, the better. So this is 2 of them. You can imagine what 3 or 4 would do. And again, we wore skirts for the most part, girls. Sometimes they wore little capris, depending on which kind of girl you were. You had like the nice girls, and then you had kind of the rebellious greaser type chicks and guys. So let's take a look at some of our fashion over here. I'm going to take you with me. So this is another dress from the 1950s. I'm really bad at this. And then, of course, you had poodle skirts and tight sweaters. And if you were going steady with somebody, you could either wear their leather jacket, or if you were one of those little more rebellious people, you might wear a leather jacket. And if you were really serious, he might give you his class ring, and you wore it on a chain around your neck. I forgot to wear mine today, darn it. And even these canvas sneakers were popular back then. Isn't it funny how fashion comes back in time? I have like 4 pairs of these right now. Now I want you to take a look at something else. Take a look at our 1920s. Remember the flappers that we did in the 1920s with all the fringes on there, right? Okay. Notice how short this is. Notice we're showing off our arms, right? And this is like, ooh, like high above the knee. That's how long this was. And yet take a look at this dress. Notice that it is way, way, way down past our knees. That's partially because it was a very conservative movement. So ladies, we kind of went backwards in some ways. We still kept things a little tight to show off things maybe, but we covered more of our body in the 1950s. Now guys, you wore jeans, but you would roll up the jeans down at the bottom. You would wear button-down shirts. You wore leather jackets. You would roll up white t-shirts, sometimes with cigarette boxes in your sleeve if you were a real troublemaker maybe. I don't know. So that's just a little bit about fashion. These notes are going to take a little longer because we do a lot of music and movie clips. So take your time and go ahead and play the music and enjoy and watch some of the movie clips. We'll do this in 2 different parts. So let's kind of start out our notes right with this. If I can get them out there. Voila! Look at that. Mel's Drive-In. Looks familiar maybe. Maybe you've ever seen the movie Grease or American Graffiti. By the way, for extra credit while you're sitting at home, there's 3 movies that would be great for extra credit for the 1950s. You can watch Grease. You can watch Pleasantville, which is a really interesting, it's a movie about the good and the bad of the 1950s. Kind of interesting. And then American Graffiti. Remember, you just watch it, write down 10 things about it, and you get 5 extra credit points. So let's talk about 50s culture and what's going on. All right. First of all, the 1950s we call a consumer culture. Remember, during World War II, the economy completely shifted to all war goods. If you were a bicycle place, you were now making tanks. If you were a clothing factory, you were now making uniforms or parachutes. So everything was designed for the war. There was twice as much real income per family, and there was nowhere to spend it because they weren't making a lot of things for you to buy. We were focusing on winning the war. $37 billion in savings accounts, nowhere to spend it. The 1950s, we finally see production catch up with demand. And we're starting to see some new inventions because we have lots of money, right? And we have time to have some new inventions. We see the beginning of television sets. Now, how many of you have at least 2 TVs in your house? How many of you have a TV in almost every room in your house? This is back when we had 1 TV in the house, if you were lucky, and you had maybe 2 or 3 channels, and it was in black and white. So it was a very different kind of TV than the ones we're used to with 500 channels. Some of the TV shows that were popular in the day were things like Leave It to Beaver, this idea of this perfect family, 2 sons. And I recommend that you go ahead and watch this once I'm done with this slide here. It's a really interesting clip about where women fit in that role of the 1950s. A lot of women went home after World War II because their guys came home. And they took the jobs then, and the women decided to stay home, which is an amazing job. Raising kids, I think, is the most honorable, hardest job there is. But the difference is back then, we didn't have a whole lot of choice. We tended to have to stay home. Okay? We had the Little Rascals. I still think that this one looks like my father when he was little. Howdy Doody, The Twilight Zone. Some of you maybe like some of those oldies. The Lone Ranger, a hero to a lot of little boys back then. And one of my favorites, I Love Lucy, a nice little comedy. So I recommend you watch this clip right now on Leave It to Beaver and look at what's going on there. And then take a look at this clip from I Love Lucy. It's a really famous piece from the Chocolate Factory. Your parents might recognize this one. Go ahead and check it out. Okay, other things that we buy with consumer culture. We start building office computers. Now look at what I mean when I say office computers. We're not talking about the computer that I'm actually filming on right now. We're talking like computers as big as this room or an adding machine. That would be a computer back then. Washing machines. Oh my goodness. You know, it started with these machines where we had to scrub everything by hand. Now we actually have machines that actually do it for you. Whew, so nice. And the 50s, some of my favorites, we have cars. Some of my favorite cars. 57 Chevy. Oh my goodness. Check it out. Notice the white wall tires. See that right there? Yep, white wall tires, very famous. Notice the shapes tend to be very round, and they have fins on the back. They're also made out of steel, so they are really strong. They don't break very easily in an accident. They kind of hit you like a Mack truck. They'd probably destroy anything we made nowadays, that's for sure. Here's another one for you there. A couple other examples. Aren't they beautiful? The colors. And remember, the difference now, you know, in the 40s, you had a car that was functional, that helped get your family around, and you saved gas because you were saving gas for the war effort. These, the drawback, they're gas guzzlers, and they use up all kinds of gas. They're heavy, they're expensive, but we have money in our savings account, so we can afford to buy some of those cars. These are also great race cars. I don't know if any of your grandpas were drag racers that would drag the line. I know some of my relatives did a little bit of that, but it's a lot of fun cars. This is also the era where people just start buying up houses, and we move into the suburbs. The question is why? A couple of things. First of all, notice that things start changing. Of 15 cities of 1 million population or more, 14 of them actually shrink in size. Yes, they do. Suburbs grew 40 times faster than cities. So places like Brandon, where we live right now, they grew definitely during this era. Number one reason, roads improved. So it was easier to get from one place to another. So let's say you had a job in Sioux Falls. you could still drive there from Brandon. It was easy to do. By the way, this is also where our highways are built. The guys come home from World War II and they see the Audubon and they're like, wow, we need to have better roads at home. So we built the very first highway system across the nation. Now, it isn't what you think it is. It's not the interstate out here like Interstate 90. It would be like Highway 11 that goes out past where Huset's was, okay? This is also when the famous Route 66 was built. Bonus for you, which kids movie followed along Route 66? Do you remember? Yes, it was Cars. Another reason why suburbs are popular. Businesses start to move out because the land is cheaper in those suburbs. So people move near their jobs. And if you look at Brandon, the same exact thing happened here, actually, in my lifetime. A lot of businesses have moved out here because land is cheaper. And so if you're working at Crimson Fire, for example, you might live right near here. Ladies, the 1950s is where we start shopping. Yes, it actually becomes a thing. In 1945, there were 8 malls across the nation. By 1960, there were 3,840 malls. But when we talk about malls, we're not talking like the mega mall in Minneapolis. We're talking a mall like this. Usually they were very much one level, and they take up like 2 or 3 city blocks, something like that. Another reason for suburbanization is just easier to buy a house for numerous reasons. Number one, the FHA, or Federal Housing Administration, said that veterans that came home from the war didn't have to put any money down. Now that can be either World War II or Korean War veterans. They're trying to help out those vets. Secondly, banks were more lenient on down payments. And third, houses were just cheaper because of mass production. For the first time ever, we are pumping out houses as fast as we can get them built because of a man named Abraham Levitt. Abraham Levitt came up with a way to build houses as cheaply as possible. We called them Levitt towns. And if you can imagine, every house had the exact same floor plan. Same floor plan. All the parts were pre-cut, so all the pieces were the same. They had the same color paint even, so it was cheaper to buy the paint in bulk. Can you think of any areas, maybe in Sioux Falls, where you've seen this kind of thing going on? Yeah, I know there's one kind of over off of the interstate and off of Rice Street, a little bit off of the corner there. We tend to change different colors, but a lot of their floor plans tend to be the same, or they'll use like 2 of them and just alternate those 2. It's easier for first-time home buyers. It's a little bit cheaper. They said it used to be funny because you would be playing outside with your neighbor friends, and you'd have to go and get a drink or go to the bathroom in your friend's house, and you knew exactly where it was because the bathroom was in the same spot in their house that it was in yours. So it made it much cheaper. They were building 1,000 houses at a time. One house was finished every 16 seconds, if you can imagine. Another reason why suburbs grew, people finally want their own space. Remember, cities grew right around the turn of the century in 1900-ish era, but they want their own little space with the white picket fence. It's better because of the baby boom. They have all kinds of kids. The guys who come home from the war, World War II, they want to start having children. And because the economy is good, they're having many children. How many of your grandparents have more than 4 brothers or sisters? Think about that. Yeah. On my one side of my family, I think they have 6. And on the other side, they have 5. Yeah, because the economy is good, so we feel more comfortable having more children. Plus, birth control hasn't been invented quite yet. It's coming up soon. In 1957, 4.3 million babies were born. That is 1 baby every 7 seconds, if you can imagine. Now, I love this chart because not only does it show us the baby boom, which is right up here. If you'll notice, this line right here on top is total population. The one next to it with the dots in it, that's total number of births. So this is our baby boom right here. And then the one down here is our death rate. Okay? But what I think is neat about this chart is it also shows you other things in our history. And we can tell things by just looking at this graph. So, for example, we know that in the 50s, life is good, money's good, so the baby boom is popping, right? Why do you suppose our birth rate is so low in the 1930s? Think about what's going on. Yeah. The dirty 30s, the Great Depression, people don't have money, they can't afford the kids that they do have, so they're not having many kids. Now take a look, there are two spikes. We see one here in 43 and one in about 47. Why do you think there's a spike right there, and then there's a drop right between there? Think 1940s, World War II. The first wave of World War II soldiers came home right around 1943, and the second wave came home between 45 and 46-ish era. So as soon as they came home, they started getting married, they started having kids. How about over on this other side? Let's take a look. Why do we see a drop like right over here in the 70s? Anybody know? It's a little bit ahead of where we're at in history right now. What was the economy like in the 70s? Yeah, economy was horrible in the 70s. So we tend to not have as many children. Notice it also spiked right here, 1970. Any idea why it spiked there? There's another event that just is kind of wrapping up right about then. The Vietnam War. Good for you if you thought of that. Good for you. Okay, I think we're going to stop for that point right now, and we'll come back tomorrow with the other half.